allowing ourselves to be seen as only obsessed with capital. The sort of things that my party is interested in and concerned about are the same as others. And so my strategy, the thing that I've set out to do with my party, is to try and broaden the recognition of the party, to show that actually we are concerned about the quality of life issues in a way that perhaps people had thought we weren't. And by that I mean, of course, things like the health service, education, vitally important,
Why would they
law
think
and order,
you weren't?
and of course
Why would they
transport.
think you weren't?
Because I think the problem is, and something I said we have to face up to, is that we probably spend a lot of time talking hugely about things like Europe, about taxation.
But your
Yes,
whole career has made Europe the most important issue facing the
David,
country.
Europe is a hugely important issue, but what I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of very important issues as well. And the problem for us is that the public had genuinely, I believe, begun to see us as a party that was obsessed with a couple of issues, but not a broad range of issues. And there's a second thing, too, which is important, which is I also think that what I want to do is to also broaden out the base of the party so that those who become councillors, and we've had some success at that, but also become MPs, are from a wider range. You know, we need more people, obviously, from ethnic backgrounds, more women at the highest level of politics. We're making some inroads at councillors, but we have to make a greater drive on that, and that is also part of the internal purpose of what I'm doing with the party. So, yes, I do accept there is a need for change, not to be against Conservatives, but to be Conservatives that I know and see, but to show that face to the public and to be there with policies to solve what I think is a huge crisis in our public services right now. And that is where we must be if we want to win the next election.
Right. Let's take up some of those points, and I'll come to the one about candidates a bit later on, if I may. But the man in the third row from the back there, you, sir.
If you are genuine about public services, you'll be the first Conservative there is, because you spent 18 years dismantling them.
I don't actually believe we spent 18 years dismantling them. Clearly we're going to disagree about this one, but I'm not here to refight the 97 election, because whatever I do, every time I fight it, we lose. So what I'm here to do is to face up to what is the crisis and the problem right now. And whatever else we may disagree about, what we, I think, will agree about is that the public services right now are in a crisis and it needs resolving. We have health treatment which is going completely haywire. We have more people queuing for treatment. And the other day I noticed that nearly 250,000 people now actually have to buy their treatment. This is not people, by the way, who have insurance. This is people who sell a car, an insurance policy or whatever. What they have to do is buy their health treatment because they're not getting it under this particular government. So this is a crisis right now, and I really want to resolve it.
And this is one we'll come back to if we can avoid
right.
the public services for the moment.
Yeah.
The woman in the first row.
Right. Do you think the reason why young people don't connect to the Conservative Party is that because we're the Thatcher generation?
You're the Thatcher generation?
Yes, we grew up
well,
with the Tories.
I think there's probably a wide variety, but I'm here as much to listen as to if you tell me what those reasons are. But I think there's a wide variety of reasons why people don't. I think, and I got the sense that there is a general apathy about politicians across the board, whether we be on the left or the right.
What do you say about Thatcher?
My experience growing up, we grew up through the recession, and being told as a child that I wasn't allowed toys because we were going through a recession. That is my personal experience of the Conservative Party. I was just wondering whether you thought it had an impact on our generation.
Well, clearly it's had an impact on you. I'm not sure how many people that experience had an impact on. I know this much, that the present state of the economy now, the economy that we handed over, is hugely due to the changes that were made in the 1980s. It's made it infinitely more competitive. And of course, there were two recessions. The second recession certainly hurt, and that was something that clearly I, as a Conservative, regret that we ever had to have. But, you know, again, I can't keep going back over old ground. The lesson I have to learn from that is that we never want to be back in that situation again. And the purpose I want my party to be engaged in is to make sure that actually we get forward with the solutions now to solve what I think is the growing crisis, which is quality of life issues and the public services, and learn from the lessons of the past, hopefully, and re-engage you and others of your age group.
There are a lot of people with their hands up, and I want to try and bring something. Could I go to the questioner, first of all, if she wants to come back in? Do you want to come back in on this? Yes.
Well, I mean, going back to the lady who was talking earlier, I was also born in the Thatcher years. I grew up in the Thatcher years. And I think it's going to take something great from the Tory party for me to vote for them again, because it's just had such an effect on people of my generation that something really needs to be done, because what I'm seeing from the Tory party today, there's not been... I don't see anything of the Tory party besides when they're reacting to the Labour Party. Why don't I know anything about your issues instead of reacting to Labour?
Yeah, well, that's the point. That's the purpose of what I'm doing. I've been here as leader for 9 months. And what I'm doing is set the strategy out that I explained to you earlier on, which is about widening the base of appeal of the party by going on what I consider to be the big crisis issues now that really obsess people generally, to go on those quality of life issues and to produce policies. Now, we're not going to produce policies in 9 months. And certainly part of that process is for me to point out where the government is going wrong. Look, if I didn't point out that the government, I think, is failing in terms of its health policy, its education policy, and its transport policy, I think you would be justified in saying I was negligent because my duty is to try and scrutinise and to check the executive of the government. But that's not enough. I accept that. And the purpose I'm engaged in now is to work those policies out thoughtfully so that when we put the policies out and launch them, they allow you to say, yes, that makes sense, that in health they've got the right idea. And one of the things that I'm doing, and it really is quite important, that you say you're coming back to health, but if I can just make this point, I've sent my team, and myself as well, all over Europe to look and to study the health services in other countries because they're better than ours. People don't have waiting lists. They don't
go down that path because we will come.
It's not about the health service. It's just the illustration of what I'm trying to do.
Sounds about the health service.
No, I won't. I promise you I won't get any further on the health service. The point I'm making is I want my party to recognise where we can see best practice and we can bring that back as policies and show you that would work here and make that work as policy. That, I believe, is the way in which I hope to excite your imagination and get you to think that we do actually have those solutions.
Okay. The man there in the second row from the back. No, the second row from the back, yes.
Quite frankly, I see a Conservative Party that has no policies whatsoever. So how the hell are you going to try to appeal to the vast majority of people, and in particular younger people?
Well, that's exactly what I was just saying earlier on. I'm not going to suddenly come to you a year after we lost an election and say, look, we lost that election, but here is a range of policies we've now worked out in 12 months that tell you we're going to put this right, and we've got 3 to 4 years before the next election. That would be arrogant and stupid. What I'm going to do, and what I'm doing at the moment, is to go out and to listen to what many of you, up and down the country, are saying the real problems are, where you think the way in which the government has failed, to try and find out exactly and specifically what those failures are, which I intend to do and am doing, and then, on the back of that lesson, produce the policies that actually solve those problems. We're already some way down that road, but I will apply those principles. And one of the biggest principles that I believe the Conservative Party has, which I want to apply to those solutions, is to give all of you much greater control over the way that you live your lives. There's far too much centralised power. Government, whether it's Milburn, who's head of the health service, or whoever it happens to be running the department, literally runs everything from schools and hospitals and doctors. And what I want to do is push that power down so that hospitals, doctors themselves, schools can run them without looking over their shoulder at the government, at politicians,
all right.
with parents.
You appointed an MP specifically to look after young people and represent young people, Charles Hendry. He says we can make it fashionable to be Conservative. Now, you've got an audience of people under 35. How would you make it fashionable? Is that one of your intentions?
Well, by fashionable, yes, it is, but in the sense that what Charles meant by fashionable, and what I would mean by fashionable, is that people look at the Conservative Party and say, look, that party is now the most up-to-date party. It's the party that actually is more relevant to the way I live my life, but more particularly, the things it's talking about, the policies that it really believes are the right policies, are the ones that I would do if I was in power. These are the things that are going to give me greater control and are going to make the quality of my life better. That is surely the best way to be fashionable, not to go for gimmicks, but to be solidly about solutions to problems, and those problems at the moment are the quality of life issues.
You brushed off the way that the party is seen. John Bercow said that the Tory party was seen as racist, sexist, homophobic and anti-youth. Do you agree that it is seen as all those 4 things?
I'm certain that there are people out there that see the party in either all or some of that light, and there are many who don't. But my point would be that is not the party that I lead. And what I need to do is to show the real face of the Conservative Party to the public and not pretend as though they're automatically going to discover that. So that's what we have to do, to show that we are not as you just described.
Well, we've got a lot of people with their hands up, but I'm going to take a specific question. We'll keep on this subject of the Tory party, but a question from Sonia Sem, please. Sonia Sem.
Given that Asian people are 10 a penny, do you think that your party is ready to take on the issues of a multicultural, diverse Britain?
Just a reminder for... This is a reminder for viewers, this was Anne Winterton, who made a joke about throwing Pakistani out of a train window, saying they were 10 a penny in Britain, and she was sacked from the shadow cabinet. But she wasn't sacked from the party, and she didn't lose the whip. And it goes to the heart of one of the things you're talking about. The party is seen as racist. What's your answer to the question?
Well, the party's not racist. So the first thing I did when I came into as leader was to sort out there are and were an element of people who get into the party on the fringe, and I've sorted one or two of those people out. I've sorted the Monday Club out, and I've made it absolutely impossible for anybody with connections to BNP to be involved in the Conservative Party. I don't want those people. If they want to be in my party, well, they've got the wrong idea.
So why is Anne Winterton in the party still?
Anne Winterton made a mistake. She made a stupid joke at a dinner. She has paid the price for that, and she has said to me that she regrets doing it. And as far as I'm concerned, she has lost her job in the shadow cabinet, and I draw a line under that. But the truth is, and I acted immediately as soon as I heard it, and I make no bones about it, I said to everybody that I want my party to include everybody from all walks of life, from all elements of society, and the way that we will do that is by being, as I've said before, a party that reflects the best interests of everybody. And I have appointed a number of advisors, Shailesh Vara, Judith Edwards, all of them from ethnic backgrounds who are strong conservatives who have stood at election as candidates. And we have a much larger list of councillors from Asian backgrounds in Croydon and Bradford. So there is a caricature. It's not true. And there are as many people, I would say, in other parties like the Labour Party and even the Liberal Democrats who may themselves have those sort of ghastly views that you were describing. It isn't right just to focus on the Conservative Party. I think all parties need to deal with that and deal with it strongly. And I will, and I have done, and I promise you, I want more people from ethnic backgrounds in my party, not because it's politically correct, but because it's politically effective.
Can I, just before I bring the audience in, can I ask you why, if all that is true, how it came about that you appointed Lawrence Robertson as a whip when he had said society is undermined by immigration?
I'm not aware that Robertson said that, and I've appointed him as a whip
he
because
said that
his
he
job
supported
is to
what
stick by the
he
line.
said he supported what John Townend had
well,
said.
That's different. No, that is quite different. No, as you recall, I'm not going to go back over old ground, but I will say this, David. It's no good asserting that he said something when he didn't actually.
He said the comments were basically true.
What he was saying was what he knew what John Townend had said. He spoke before he knew the full facts of what had been going on, and afterwards he didn't say any more. And he was appointed because he agreed with me that the actions I have taken are right, and he will stick to the party line, which is exactly the line I've given that lady there, exactly that, which is that we are a party that will include members of all the society and not just some.
Okay. The man in the blue jacket there.
You may want that for your party, and you may be able to achieve that, but the overwhelming perception of the people that vote for you is not that's not the case.
Well, it may be right now, but I have to tell you that is going to change, and it is changing. I believe fundamentally that if I'm going to get re-elected as to be Prime Minister, and if I'm going to take my party into power, we know, they know, that we need to be broader, and the image of the party needs to be a broad image that covers the whole of the country, a party that will govern for the whole nation. And that's exactly what we're doing. That's what my strategy of helping the vulnerable is all about. It's about dealing with those in society who are least able to help themselves, and all of our programs and plans will be aimed at them. And I make no excuses for that. That is exactly what I came into politics for, and I'm passionate about that, and I intend to see it through.
Yes.
Okay, it's already been said that the Conservative Party are looked on as racist and sexist, and you've just said that it's all going to change. Now, I was brought up in, obviously, the Thatcher years as well. So why now, in 2002, as a young black male, would I vote Conservative? What are you going to do for my community?
You share the values. It's all about shared values. I believe that ultimately the solutions to much of the problems, or many of the problems that we see, are about giving people like you much greater control over the way you live your lives. It's about saying, I trust you more than this government trusts you. I don't believe that the centralised level of power, in other words, giving you an opportunity to be able to improve your life. That's the key, whether it's through giving you more of your own money, whether it's being able to give you health treatment as and when you need it, whether it's going to give you the opportunity to choose schooling for your child. That's the key factor that affects you as much as it affects, surely, everybody else in this audience.
Don't you think it's also an issue about understanding why the problems are there,
yes,
rather than just throwing money at us and saying that we can do this?
I absolutely agree with you. That's exactly what the problem is at the moment. The government says that the solution is always that we're just going to spend more money. But actually, they've said they've spent more money on the health service, and we don't see any level of improvement in line with the amount of money that they've spent. Why? Because more and more of the power and the control in the health service has been centred back on Whitehall and on politicians. My point is, the solution is to push that power down to you. To give you, if you're a parent, I don't know if you're a parent.
Yeah, I'm a parent.
If you're a parent, I believe that you should have much greater choice in where your child goes to school and much greater choice in the quality of your schooling. At the moment, we have a two-tier education system. If you happen to be unlucky enough to be in the inner city, your chances for your child are much less than those on the outer boroughs and in the leafy shires. That cannot be right, and that's down to our failure to recognise the best people to take decisions about running those schools are the teachers, the head teachers, and you, the parents. Those are the people we should trust, and you're not trusted at the moment.
But would you say you understand
hold on a
this?
second. I'll tell you what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go to these two subjects, both of which you keep coming back to, and they're obviously things you very much want to talk about. Let's talk about those, and then we'll go on to talk about some of the issues. So let's take this question from Marcus Hart, please. Marcus Hart.
Is the way forward for a successful health service to remain a national health service funded by tax, or is it time to start rethinking the way that health services in this country are offered?
Right. And the key to this is funded by tax or some other system of funding.
Well, actually, the key to this is how we run it first and then how we finance it. That's how you should do it, and not the other way around. I mean, that's the problem that the government's got into. What I am passionate and believe in is that we should have a health service that enables people to get treatment when they need it, regardless of their ability to pay. That's an absolute, and won't be changed by us in any shape or form. But the problem we've got at the moment is that we have a health service that is essentially run centrally by politicians against requirements that the politicians say they need. And what I've been doing over the last few months is going to other countries to look at why theirs are different and why their systems are better than ours. And what you find in almost every single case, there are different types of structures, you find that their health services are run in a much more decentralized way. In Stockholm, for example, you get hospitals that are run by the county council, and that the patients in Stockholm have the right to choose their doctors, their treatment. They have very small waiting lists. In Germany, there are no waiting lists at all, and it's all down to structure first.
But he's asking about money. He's asking about tax.
Let me come to the money.
Well, we haven't got all
I know,
all
but
the
it's
time
an
in the world.
important subject.
But can you answer his question about tax?
It isn't just an issue of money. Sure, the health service needs more money, but what we also need is to broaden the range of treatment. You need greater voluntary sector work, and you need greater private sector involvement. And you may need to look at other ways of raising money. But you know, at the moment, in Northern Ireland, we spend as much money on health, and in Wales, as they do in France. They have no waiting lists in France, and yet in Northern Ireland and Wales, they have worse waiting lists than we do in England. That means that it's not just money, it's structure. That's the key.
All right. Do you want to come back in on that?
Yes. I think that the National Health Service in its current state is becoming a bottomless pit, and I don't think no matter how much we pay in income tax to fund the National Health Service, we can provide a top-quality, state-of-the-art, world-class service like we once could. And I do think that it's actually time now to start thinking about funding from other areas apart from income tax.
Funding privately?
Yes.
Do you want to see private funding?
I'm looking at all levels of funding, whether it's best done
indeed.
through tax
You
or
would be,
private.
because you're looking at everything. But do you want to see private funding?
What I want to see, and this is the absolutely key point, I want to see a system that can use the money effectively. The point I was making about money is that here in the UK, you already have parts of the health service that are spending at levels of the best health services in Europe. And they are miles off. They're not getting anything like that treatment.
But Mr.
And the
Duncan,
key thing is to
sorry to
change the
interrupt
system.
you. Everybody wants money spent efficiently. I mean,
Yes.
everybody here would agree money had to be spent efficiently. The question a lot of people here and people watching you want to know is it part of your plan not to fund solely by tax, but to increase the funding that comes privately, to put on either an insurance scheme or to charge people for going to see their GPs, both of which have been mentioned?
But David, I've said already, I am at the moment looking at which will be the best system. I haven't ruled out doing that because I think it's best for me to, and this is exactly what I'm doing, looking at the other systems and seeing where the balance of fairness lies.
Right, so it's not ruled out.
It's not ruled out. But what is most important, it's absolutely critical, this. It's no good just saying the argument is about money. It's not. In the last 5 years, The Economist about a week ago said that the productivity levels in the health service had collapsed. And the reason is because the government has centralised all decision-making back on Whitehall. Doctors, administrators, we've got all those records of fiddled figures, and we have longer waiting lists.
But some people...
So that's the key.
But
It's
some
got
people
to be
may
about
want
the way
to
you
know...
run it.
I mean, you say it's not a question of money, but for many people, they do want to know whether it is a question of money, whether your policy at the next election would mean them having to pay for services they get free. You know that.
But they don't
I mean,
get
you know
them free,
that's
David.
true.
Let's
That
be
is-
honest about
no,
it.
well, they don't actually have to
But I think,
take cash to the
people
GP
are more
for it.
intelligent than pretend that they get services free. They
Right.
get them free at the point of delivery, but they all pay for them through tax, so it's not free.
Okay, the man there with the pen in his pocket. You, sir.
In private health, my brother lives in the States, $600 a month. If you do that here, you just put at least half the families without any medical care.
Okay, and the
Well,
guy
that's
at the
not
back...
true.
Sorry, just take another point. The man in the pink shirt there, at the back. You, sir.
Right. Would you commit to fund the NHS to the level set out in the Wanless report?
The Wanless report is a rolling programme. I am committed to funding the health service at exactly what is required to fund it. Now, it may be more, and it may be slightly less, but the point about Wanless is, what Wanless said, and it was the report that the Chancellor commissioned before the budget, what the Wanless report said was that there's only one way of funding it. It's taxation. And my argument is they never looked at any other system elsewhere. And the answer to the point about immediately everybody suffers, it's not altogether true. In all the other systems, whether it be Germany or France, the key point is that everybody gets that health treatment and they don't have to wait for it and they get it at the moment that they need it. My point is we have to find a system that delivers just that. It isn't about saying suddenly you're going to be excluded for treatment. The point I made earlier on is people should get health treatment when they need it, regardless of their ability to pay. That's the great principle of the health service, and that's what we want to hold on to. But
Okay.
at the moment, they're not getting health treatment when they need it.
I'll take one more point from the woman in the back row there. You.
Surely the point is that it's not about necessarily more money. If Northern Ireland and Wales are spending the same amount as France, we may not need more money. It's more about management issues.
It is, I think it's absolutely about how you deliver the health treatment. You know, the reality here is that all of those places, they trust the doctors and the nurses to be able to make those decisions without constantly checking against the figures. And the point I made earlier on, you know, in a state-run system in Sweden, in Stockholm, they choose. A patient can choose the hospital and the doctor. You can't do that here unless you go private. You have to go and apply, and a bureaucrat somewhere will decide for you. That is ultimately wrong.
What do you pay to see
need
a
be able
GP
to
in
do it.
Sweden?
They don't pay to see GPs. They pay a bit more for their medicine, but they don't pay to see GPs.
How much more do they pay?
I don't know the exact total of the figure of money, but that we pay for prescriptions here as well, a large chunk of the population. I'm not talking about whether you charge. I'm saying the choice at the point of delivery is that they can choose their hospital and their doctor, and they aren't ruled out by a bureaucrat. And that, I think, is the key. You know, do you really want to have... Here we have, look, we need a new century, and you choose everything in your lives until it gets to healthcare, and suddenly you're told, oh no, politicians know best for you. Well, we don't, and I think it's time we gave you that opportunity to choose.
All right, now we've taken up 25 minutes. We've only got through 2 questions, and I want to get through a lot more if we can. Amy Hassel, please. Amy Hassel.
Are there any comprehensive schools which you wouldn't touch with a barge pole?
This is Estelle Morris's remark about comprehensive schools. Some of them were so lousy she wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. What's your view?
My view is that the problem lies hugely in inner city areas. I don't think it's helpful to go around saying that certain schools shouldn't be touched with a barge pole. I think there are good schools in inner city areas that are struggling, and I think we need to understand why they're struggling. And I think the real key here is that if you look at the successful schools, you will find that those are the schools where the head teacher and the teachers work closely with the parents and they make the decisions. And in many cases, sometimes, they do it without sticking exactly to the rules set down by the local education authority. In other words, they try and run their schools for the pupils, not for the bureaucrats and the politicians. There are huge problems, and most of those problems, I'm afraid, are about the fact that we just don't trust people who are professionals with those parents to run the schools. I would love to give the schools much greater power to run themselves, but I don't believe it's good to go around sneering at schools. A lot of good teachers and head teachers are trying really hard to get a good education level and being told that they're useless is not a particularly good way to go about helping them.
Robin Cook said in the House of Commons yesterday that the trouble with you is, and your views on this, is that you wouldn't touch a secondary school with a barge pole, any of them, because you educated your children privately. What do you say to that?
Well, Robin Cook can try and make cheap points. My children have gone to private and state school, and I don't have any particular qualms. I have to tell you right now that I, like any other parent, will always lay my children as the first priority in my life. I will make the choices for my children, and people here may disagree with that, but I will make the choices I believe best for my children, regardless of what anybody else thinks, and I will always do that.
Okay. Let me bring in the woman in the second row, the middle of the three there, of the three women. I'm trying to bring in people who haven't spoken already, if I can. Yes?
Hasn't the marketisation of education brought in by the last Conservative government led to a polarisation of the good schools and the bad schools, so that league tables have made good schools much better, but bad schools have been failing, and this actually makes things worse as opposed to better?
No, I don't think after 5 years we can go on simply saying it was all the Conservatives' fault. You know, how long do we go on for saying this government got a bye for 10 years before we ask them to take responsibility for what they've done? This government has made some very major changes to education since they came in, and they are now saying they got it wrong. So for 5 years they have been centralising decision-making. They took away grant-maintained status. Those were the schools that actually ran themselves, ran their budgets. They took that away from them. They put them back in the control of very politically motivated local education authorities. And we've seen the standards and quality in many of those schools plummet, particularly in inner city areas. No, I think the government has to stand up after 5 years, and as you get Estelle Morris, the Secretary of State, saying she wouldn't touch some schools with a barge pole. Well, wake up, Estelle. You've been in charge for 5 years. You were making those decisions. No, I'm not taking the blame for that. I think it's the Labour Party.
Your idea of devolving power down to individual schools and to give power to parents where it's appropriate all sounds fine in areas where the parents are well educated and where they have the time and the drive and the ability to do that. But how does it resolve the problems of inner cities where the parents may not have the ability to take that responsibility on and may not, quite frankly, have the inclination to do that, and to resolve problems of severe inner city schools? How is that resolved through devolving power down to the parents?
Well, that problem is not resolved by taking the power away from them. The reason that I want it pushed down is because the first thing that happens is that the teachers and the head teachers then can take the decisions that are right for those pupils. Now, you're right. In some areas there are parents who don't take that level of interest that they do in others, for reasons that maybe they're failures of the system themselves. I had a school in my constituency that was right in the middle of a very, very bad sort of sinker state. And the head teacher there tackled the problem in an imaginative way. What he did was he brought all the parents in who normally don't come near the school, and he told them, your children have a chance of success or a chance of failure. The chance of success is that you as parents actually help us to take them through this education process and get them out of the sort of lives that you're living. Now, if you work with us, you may not know everything. We're going to help you to help them. And what he did was he actually got them in and taught them what their children were learning ahead of time, so they could actually do that themselves with them at home. There are lots of other projects, too, that can help parents like this.
All right, let's not go into them all,
well,
because we've got a lot more
so
to talk about.
we shouldn't give up on them, that's the point.
Just before we leave education, you said trust the head teacher to know what's best for the school. You've said it tonight. Do you trust the head teacher to give contraception to children under 16 at school?
I think that this refers to the announcement today. I think this is a ludicrous announcement, because what was missing completely from the announcement was any comment about where the parents stood in this. It was not even mentioned that the parent had any involvement in this. And my point is, you can't bypass parents who have the responsibility for picking up the pieces afterwards and simply say, we'll do this in schools, now you must do it, and put pressure on teachers. The head teachers don't want to do it. That was the announcement this evening. And as far as I'm concerned, I think this is a silly decision. It's a gimmicky decision. And actually, it's parents who should be involved in this, and them with their children and the doctors and the teachers can make those decisions. But don't leave parents out. This government seems to think they have no responsibility at all. Parents should make those decisions.
And are you in principle opposed to children under the age of consent being issued with contraceptives, whether with their parents' agreement or not? Or is that a matter for the parents?
I'm certainly on the basis of proposed today, which is that they're going to go to schools.
But in general?
Or in general, I believe without parental consent and without any involvement of the doctor, which this is all about, there should it should not happen, and that was exactly what the proposal was today. I mean, look, the government spends its time saying they want good, stable families, and at every turn they actually undermine them by taking away any level of parental control or responsibility. I think parents should keep control, and I think they should be brought
Just
into
on this subject, anybody? Do you want to come in on that subject? Yes.
How would you then tackle Britain's record as having the highest teenage pregnancies in Europe? What would you do? What's your alternative to giving out free contraceptives to under 16s?
I think education is the key to it, telling people exactly what happens and what the responsibilities are if they do engage in sex. And the real point here is that you need to tell quite clearly children at that age just exactly what this is all about, and to talk to them about peer pressure, particularly amongst young girls, and to say to them, look, you have to resist this, you really have to say no. And the reason is because this may be all right for the boy, but your life will be a misery afterwards when you have to pick up the pieces. Now, all I'm saying to you is parents, for the most part, have the interests of their children at heart. And I think if you try and exclude them from all of that, then you simply undermine what is the most stable support mechanism for children. I think that's wrong.
Okay. Now, look,
that's exactly the key.
All right, we're going to go on to some other subjects. I'm going to ask a special favour of you, because a lot of you have got your hands up all the time, and I'm sorry I can't bring you all in. But if, as we go on, just people who haven't yet spoken who want to speak, if there aren't enough hands up, I shall shout for more. But I think it'd be fair to those who haven't had a chance to get in yet, to let them get in. We're going on to talk about Europe in just a moment. Just before we do, next week, Question Time is in London, and on our panel, the Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott, the Tory Deputy Leader, Michael Ancram, and his Liberal Democrat counterpart, Alan Beath. Now, if you'd like to be in the audience, this is the number to ring. It's on the screen, 09011 114 411. Or you can email us with an application. You can log on to our website, World Wide Web, bbc.co.uk/questiontime. And there you can also comment on the subjects being raised in tonight's programme, of which the next one comes from David Hartley. Mr. Hartley, please.
Hello. In the event of a Euro referendum, you've made some interesting comments on that, and or your spokespeople have anyway. Can you give me an assurance that you will lead a no campaign if we do have a referendum?
My party is going to campaign against scrapping the pound, and I will lead that vigorously. I can lead my party, but I can't lead the element of the Labour Party or others. So what I'm saying is I will lead my party. You will be seeing me all the time on this because I am passionate about this, and I intend to win that campaign.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, I mean, I see as Britain totally isolated in Europe at the moment. I see companies like Massey Ferguson, one of the biggest tractor firms in the world, going down. They were based in Coventry. They're now going to France, and the reason they've given is because we're not in the euro. And you talk about trusting young people, Mr. Duncan Smith, and wanting to give people choice. Well, why is it that not one person in this room is going to, if you get into government, is going to have a choice about the euro? We should have a referendum, and under Conservative government as well. And why is it that you don't trust us to make that decision?
Okay.
Well, I do.
You don't.
When's your referendum going to be if you do trust us to make the decision?
What do you need a referendum for? I want to keep the pound, and when I get into power, I intend to keep the pound.
Because
as far as I'm concerned, that's what the public want, and that's our policy. So you only need a referendum if you're going to scrap it, surely.
No, hold on a second. I don't think you've understood his question quite.
I want a choice about whether I use the pound or the euro. I imagine an awful lot of other people want to be trusted to have that choice in a referendum. Now, your party at the last general election campaigned about pretty much nothing else than the euro. Your candidates were going up and down constituencies in the West Midlands and elsewhere, saying, save the pound, 3 more days to save the pound, 1 more day to save the pound. And you lost. Now, I think the British people have said to the Labour government, we want a referendum. Now, you're saying that if you win the next election, and Tony Blair hasn't called a referendum by then, there isn't going to be one. Well,
why not? Is what,
why?
To bring it to a conclusion, why
well,
not?
I just take a very simple view. Look, we have the pound sterling, and if you want to scrap it, I think you have to. It's such a big... it's a big decision to take because you're going to give away your economic decision-making and eventually you will cede huge amounts of political power to either central bankers or to another authority.
But hang on a second. Hang on a second.
He wants to know why, and I'm simply going to answer the question. I'm not proposing to do any of that.
No, but he wants you to give the British people a chance to say, hang on, to say whether they would like the euro or not. You know this is an issue. You know the country's divided. The Labour Party have said they'll give a referendum. Why not have an advisory referendum, clear the matter up once and for all, yes or no? The Conservatives will give you that chance.
I listen and hear what you're saying, but my view is that we are clear. We're not planning to make a change. I think if you change, if you make a constitutional change, you have a referendum. I mean, there is no other parallel in life where you just have a referendum because you think it's a good idea to check everybody's views on something. The fact is, unless you're going to change it or scrap it, why do you need a referendum? You only need it if you're going to take those powers away and give them to somebody else. I'm not going to do it, so I don't believe we need a referendum. I hear what you say.
Hold on. The man in the white shirt over there, at the very far left.
With the economy actually facing a crisis at the moment, don't you feel that joining the euro would be a way forward for the UK and that sterling can actually dominate within the European zones?
Well, sterling wouldn't be able to dominate in a European zone if it was scrapped. What would happen is that we would lose our currency and our interest rates, the ability to set our interest rates, and essentially we'd be handing them over to someone else who will set them on the basis of what is essentially good, in their view, for a general view of what is good for Europe. And my view is that we will manage our own economy as the fourth largest economy in the world quite successfully. I don't think, by the way, that it's possible to say if this economy is going into crisis. At the moment, the economy is doing all right. In Germany, there is a crisis. They have massive unemployment, something like 4.5 million people unemployed. They have a very slow economy indeed, and that is a matter of huge political debate. In France, it's been pretty stagnant, and they want to cut taxation. Now, here's one very important issue. The French government that's just been elected was elected to reduce the tax burden to stimulate the economy. They've just been told by the European Union that they can't do that because that breaks the Stability Pact, and therefore they won't be able to do it. But they were elected to do it, and that's the big debate. And I'm saying if you go into the euro, somebody else tells you whether your pledge at the election can be met. And it's not you, it's somebody who wasn't elected.
You haven't spoken before, have you? The man's back.
Your role in this, assuming there is a referendum, and assuming, as it was said, that the only thing that's less popular than the euro is the Tory party itself, out of something so unfashionable, how do you intend to lead people to make a choice that will effectively be as unfashionable as supporting the Tory party itself?
But actually every single political party is less popular than the pound. So as far as I'm concerned, campaigning to keep the pound is about keeping a very popular device, a very popular instrument, and a signal of our unity as a nation. But I'm going to lead the campaign from my party. I'm not planning to say I'm going to demand to lead for everybody else. Our campaign will be about keeping the pound, and I will lead that as the leader of my party, and I will do so fully in the view that we intend to win it. Now, there are many others, trade unionists, businessmen, there are members of the Labour Party who are all as well against scrapping the pound, and so there will be a broad coalition who opposes scrapping of the pound.
Okay, the man in the white tie there.
You say things are all right now, Mr. Duncan-Smith, but don't we need to look further into the future and see what things are in the future? And rather than simply reacting to what happens elsewhere, we need to be ahead of the game and perhaps join the euro now. Everybody else has. The government who thinks it's a good idea. Why isn't it?
Well, does the government think it's a good idea? You see, I never know what Mr. Blair thinks from one week to the next. On one hand, he wrote for The Sun and said, "My love for the pound," and then he tells us he wants to scrap it. And then the week after he says, well, we may not scrap it, and Gordon Brown says we won't. And they're all arguing with each other about whether they should or they shouldn't, when they would, when they wouldn't. My point is, you make the decision about whether you want to join the euro on the basis of what is good for this country. That's the absolute.
Don't we need to look further into the future, though, rather than taking it now?
Absolutely. And that's exactly the point that I'm making. I think the
You're
huge
ruling it out
decisions,
forever, though. You're saying that we should never join.
I'm saying I don't believe there are conditions in which I think it would be better for us to be in the euro, both for political reasons, that is to say,
didn't you say you'd never vote for the euro? Didn't you actually say
and for the economic reasons?
Didn't you actually say you would never vote for the euro? during the campaign?
I said that, didn't
Not
I?
under any there are no circumstances.
I don't believe that there are any circumstances.
No, but you actually said, I will never vote for the
No, I said
euro.
there are no circumstances I think are good for this country to join the euro. I will not be voting to enter the euro.
Yes, so no party ever led by you would, no. And why do you keep urging Mr. Blair to have a referendum of exactly the kind, it seems, that you were denying the gentleman up there?
Well, very simply.
When Mr. Blair hasn't made up his mind
David,
whether or not to recommend entry.
But David, that was a clever bit of misreading. Mr. Blair's view is that he wants to enter the euro. He said it. He believes
in
now...
principle, but he's not ready. You want to stay out in principle.
No.
He hasn't decided to recommend it.
David, hang on a second. You're not going to rewrite his policy no matter how hard you try. He wants to enter the euro. He said that. And so if he wants to enter, what I'm saying to him is, look, if you want to go into this, then get on with it and let's have the campaign. If you don't... Well, hang on a second. If you don't want to go into it, then stop talking about it. Let's put it on one side, because I'll tell you what is really annoying.
You've left out something about if the conditions are right, haven't you?
Oh, come on, David.
Sorry,
what are the five
you say I was...
tests?
No, you say...
David, you tell me
no,
what the
you
five
said I was
economic tests are,
rewriting
then.
the Prime Minister's
You
version
are.
of events. The Chancellor of the Exchequer got up yesterday and went through the 5 conditions. I mean, you may say you don't believe the 5 conditions. You may say they're fantasy. You may say they've made up their mind already. But you can't say that he has actually publicly said he is going to join. He said he wants to join the euro if the conditions are
Come
right.
on, David. You
mock him. Why do you mock him?
You know as well as I do.
I don't.
You know as well as I do that there is but one test, and it's whether he can win it. That's all that obsesses him. So I'm simply saying, look, hospitals, schools, transport, law and order, these are the real issues that everybody wants to get sorted out. And he keeps talking about the euro, and I say, OK, if you want to do it, get on with it. If you don't, stop talking about it and let's debate and discuss the crisis in our health service.
Yes, you, the woman in the blue tie.
I think, basically, in response to the gentleman up there, we shouldn't really go into the euro. There's 2 points. First of all, since the euro has come into circulation, there have been massive price inflation. Secondly, the actual currency itself hasn't been properly tested. So how do we know if if we can withstand it? I think it's ridiculous.
That's your view on the euro. What's your view on what Ian Duncan-Smith should do about it?
Personally, I really do think we should have a referendum and the people should choose.
So you're against the euro?
I am against the euro.
And you'd like a referendum?
I would like a referendum.
Like he would. Okay, and you, sir?
If he continues to say that he ain't going to give us a referendum, he's going to find himself not having anybody at all to vote for him at the next election. And I work along the manufacturing industry, and up and down the Midlands, I've come across companies who are saying that they're closing down, they can't get any jobs because the pound is too strong. And you're saying it's a big decision. You're no stranger to big decisions. You've got a family, you decide which school you want to send them, and we're asking you to give us a choice to make a decision.
But I'm not in power, and I won't be in power. I won't be in power for 3 to 4 years. But the point I'm simply making to you is this. Look, it isn't about whether the pound is strong alone. The truth is the government has the capacity, in terms of the problems on manufacturing industry, to lower the tax base that they have actually increased on industry. That is a device they have. It is ramped up dramatically. I mean, the IOD the other day said £10 billion a year extra cost on industry since the government came to power. That's the real reason why those businesses are closing. The state of sterling will come and go. As we see, it's even now beginning to fall against the euro. Those will change, but what won't change is the level of tax. And they could easily make it much better for industry if they lowered that tax burden. It's not just about the exchange rate. It's actually about what the government does over taxation.
We've got so many hands up. I'll take a few more points. You, sir, in the middle here. Then I get
Is
back
it not hypocrisy? A lot of people on the one hand say the Conservatives spend too much time talking about Europe and then bait the Conservative Party to talk about Europe. I think it's about time that we use the official opposition to talk about things like health and education, something that people actually care about.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay. Nice short answer. Thank you. Have you spoken before? No. Fire away.
It seems that the euro is the only thing that you have emphatically spoken about tonight. Why is it that issues that actually concern the young people, such as tuition fees, haven't been mentioned at all?
Well,
haven't been asked about them. I think.
I'm sorry, but you asked the questions. I only answer them. You're the ones asking about the euro. And all I say to you is, I don't want to sit here spending the rest of this question time simply banging the euro back and forwards with each other. My position is clear. It's for the government to make a decision. I think they ought to get on and deal with those big issues you're talking about, health, education, crime, which are all real problems at the moment, and the state of our education. It is really critical.
Okay.
I'm just as passionate about those. Give me a chance to talk about it.
What do you do for tuition fees?
Will you scrap them?
I think the real thing about tuition fees at the moment, in getting rid of the maintenance grant, which is for those pupils that come from low-income families, I think that was a big mistake, and I think we certainly need to look at reinstating that. And the second thing is, I do think that on tuition fees, the level at which people repay is far too early. We haven't made our position on this, but I certainly think that lifting it way above, it's £10,000 at the moment.
Let him answer.
I would take it much higher. We will say exactly what that is, but I think the level at which you pay dictates how you can do that and the worry that you have about whether you need to repay it.
But
so changing that and dealing with those children on low income, or the children that come from families on low income.
Are extortionate. You have to give them to your university. You can't withhold them until you then have to repay your loan. Tuition fees are a completely separate thing. My loan that I'm going to get in September will just about cover my tuition fees and my accommodation. What am I going to buy baked beans with? What am I going to buy my alcohol for Friday night for my books, more importantly?
I agree it's a real problem, and I promise you we are looking at this one, because what is coming across from pretty much all the students is that you want to see this changed. I recognise that, and I promise you it is going to change, but I really need to find out what the best system is. All I'm saying to you is, as it stands right now, it's hurting you more than it's actually succeeding, and I genuinely want to find out how best to change it. I promise you.
Okay. A lot of you still hands up, but I want to take one more question from Rebecca Dalton. Then I'm going to, for the last 5 minutes, just open it up to anybody who has questions they want to put. Let's just take this question, though, from Rebecca Dalton, please.
How would the Conservative Party address the asylum seeker problem? Do you see asylum seeker centres as the way forward?
Sorry, I couldn't see. Oh, you're there. The centres that they've got at the moment, what I believe in, first of all, the first principles we should all agree about here, is that we should always want to give a safe haven to those who are seeking refuge for genuine political reasons, whose lives may be in danger, or those of their families. That, I think, is a given. And this country, I think, has a fantastic track record over hundreds of years of doing that, and I believe passionately that we should go on doing just that. However, we know that the majority of people now applying for asylum, the vast majority, are not there for those reasons. They're using it for economic reasons. In other words, a backdoor, perhaps, to immigration. So the key to that is getting people assessed very, very quickly. And the government's proposal quite recently, which is centres, I think is, first of all, in the place that they're located, even if you have them, is idiotic, because they're miles away from anywhere where those asylum seekers would anyway wish to be.
They're all Conservative constituencies, aren't they?
Surprise, surprise. You wonder why they selected those areas, because it's only Conservative MPs now that have to get worried about it.
You might wonder why you object to them for the same grounds.
I object to the fact that it isn't practical. The problem is with these centres is that, A, they're not going to be kept there or checked. They'll come and go as they please. And if they're not in the right area, they'll just drift off.
Anne Widdecombe wanted detention centres. Is that still what you'd like to see?
Well, I'm looking at that policy again, but what I do believe is that if you're going to have them checked and you're going to have centres, those centres should have some means of making sure that those who are meant to be in there stay in there and don't just come and go, because what you'll end up with is people simply drifting out of them if they don't like the conditions that are in them. My point is the best way to deal with this is actually to make sure that the asylum seekers are assessed very, very speedily, so that the people that should genuinely be in here can be got in here and allowed to live a decent life inside our cities and towns. The problem at the moment is they're lumped together with those who are in here illegally, and as a result of that, they get treated not as well as they should. So we need to speed that up, and the government has slowed down that process. The backlog is dramatic. We have something like 50,000 asylum applications a year now, which is an increase year on year. So they haven't dealt with the real issue of speeding up that process of checking them.
Okay, I'm going to open up the debate now. Any questions anybody wants to put? Let me take a question. No, I'd take somebody who hasn't spoken yet. You've spoken. The woman in the red and white shirt there. Anything you want, and if you could be brief in your answers, we've got 5 minutes left.
I would like to know, do you think the British... Do you think the British media is the real opposition to the Labour Party and not the Conservatives?
No. I actually think that the media want to say necessarily that they are, because their daily diet is to scrutinise the government publicly on the newspapers or even in the broadcast news. My belief is that much and many of the stories that they get and they run often come from us. We will give them to the media and they will run those stories. So it's a collective. But, you know, you'd have made perhaps the same criticism of every single opposition going back through the ages. Everybody always says, where is the opposition? We don't hear from them because we don't get the same level of coverage as the government. I promise you, we are the opposition and we will scrutinise the government.
All right, hold on a second. I want to take a number of questions if I can, quickly.
What's more important to you and to your party? Long-term reform, which is making your party acceptable and appealing to us, or pandering to the short-term party support, which is the elder generations? And by this I mean, are you prepared to sacrifice the next election, I mean losing the election in the way that Neil Kinnock did, to make your party electable in 2 terms' time, because you're not going to win the next election?
Well, I believe in making my party electable for the next election, and I believe it's exactly the same point that you were making, which is to make the changes that are necessary to make. I'm going to make my party be that broad-based party that I believe it is.
It took Kinnock more than 2 terms to undo the wrongs of the Labour Party in the 70s, and you've got to do that for the Conservative parties in the 80s.
With respect, I don't think you can necessarily see that far into the future. My view is I intend to fight the next election to win. I believe we can, and I believe I can make the levels of changes that you're talking about inside that period. Now, we may agree to disagree on that one, but that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Okay, and yes, the woman there.
You said that the European health systems are better than ours. You don't really want to talk about the euro. You use the NHS as a political football. Why should we, the young voters, vote for the Conservative status quo?
It's not a status quo. But it's not a status quo. What I'm talking about is making very major change to the way that we deliver healthcare in this country. The status quo would be if I was to say to you, I'm just going to match the money and try and tinker with it on the edges. I'm not going to do that. That's dishonest. And I think politicians, for years, have been dishonest about this. The real point is, I want to confront the issue. Why do you, your parents, your relations not get the health treatment that you need when you need it? And we should be able to do that. Every other country in Europe that I have visited is able to give that to the people that vote for the government, and I intend that that is the sort of reform change that we must make here. Okay. And even though people say, Labour will say privatising and all the rest,
sorry,
it's
you
not
have
privatising.
had, I don't want to use up your time, but you
Okay.
have spoken about the NHS. I want people who haven't spoken yet. You have spoken, haven't you? No, okay, you, sir. And then I'll go to the woman at the back there. Quickly, if you would.
Mr. Smith, you say you want the party to be more inclusive and compassionate. Can you back that up by actually fielding more ethnic and black minority candidates in actual winnable seats, rather than actually fielding them or ghettoising them and cutting that number and calling them?
Okay, now your question's been... Let him answer. Give him time to
What we want to see
answer.
is candidates in the shires. We want to see candidates where there's not that many ethnic minorities, but they are representative of the population.
Okay. Actually, what I want to see is MPs from ethnic backgrounds. I don't mind which constituents they come from. I just want them in the House.
How are you going to do it?
Party.
How are you going to do it?
Well, actually, we've had quite a lot of success in the building blocks in the council elections. We have now got a large number of councillors who are from variable ethnic backgrounds who have been successful.
How many of your
Into
5
that
candidates
pool.
you've selected so far for, to be an MP are from ethnic minorities?
From the 5 of them, none of them, David. But then again, you know, I'm not going to play games. You know, all my point is that yes, it is a task.
Can you?
And
Sorry,
can I
clear
I
what?
really do mean that we will do it. But
Is there
we
any
have to
way?
start
Is there
somewhere.
any way that you can tell constituencies that you want them to do that? I mean, can you instruct them to do it, or is it? Would you think of changing the rules of choosing it?
We've already made a number of changes, both to the selection process and to the way in which we get candidates onto the list. Some very major changes have been made. We've also made changes in the way that the assessment for those lists is made when the associations look at them.
But to answer his point...
to answer his point is I believe the Conservative Party already wants that, and we have to find a way of doing it, and it will happen. Sorry?
How does it help to have Anne Winston in the party?
Well, the fact is that my party, in the body of who I am and what I'm saying and what I'm doing and what my Cabinet, Shadow Cabinet is doing is all about making sure that we get representation from all sides of life.
Okay.
I sacked her out of my Shadow Cabinet, but the rest is my decision, okay? And as far as I'm concerned, my party will make the changes necessary, and I promise you that we will end up delivering more candidates of all variety of backgrounds into Conservative seats.
We have a lot of hands up. We have 15 seconds left. A question very quickly from Gareth Walker, please. Gareth Walker.
On Sunday, will you be supporting a close European ally or the team that knocked England out of the World Cup?
Quickly.
I like the look of Brazil. I like the look of Brazil. So,
okay.
But actually, I would all I would say to you is that I must say I think Germany are quite lucky to get to that final. We whopped them 5-1, and that's got to be the best result.
Well, Question Time always has to deal with football these times. Anyway, it's all from us this week. My thanks to Ian Duncan-Smith for taking part in this, and to our audience here in Birmingham who came here. Next week we're going to be in London, and it's the final programme in this run of Question Time. We're going to have a panel made up of the main Deputy Party leaders. So if you'd like to be in the audience to challenge and question John Prescott, Michael Ancram and Alan Beath, call the number 09011114411 or visit our website, bbc.co.uk, Question Time, where you can also comment on the issues that have been raised with Mr. Duncan-Smith here tonight. And incidentally, you can also there suggest panellists that you would like to see in the next series. Until next Thursday, from all of us in Birmingham, good night.
On July 13th, join the stars on BBC One for an extraordinary evening of entertainment and fundraising. Buy a Sport Relief fundraising medal for £1.50 from Foot Locker, Oxfam, Pizza Hut, The Body Shop or the BBC Sport Relief website. July 13th on BBC One. Sport Relief. Everyone wins.
The thing about paying your TV licence by direct debit is that it's a great way of spreading the cost.
Right, so how did
Do you know how little it can cost a month?
Yes, I do.
Have a guess.
But I know.
No, but have a guess, though.
No, but I know the answer. It's just over £9 a month.
No, but have a guess.
Well, all right, £15.
£15? That's rubbish.
Okay, 12. No, 300.
To find out how little it can cost to pay your television licence by direct debit, call 0800 328 2020. And to give you a start, the answer's just over £9 a month.
When there's a thin line.
Sneaking off like a thief in the night.
I'm late for work. Between the day job.
What the super found out?
Is that a threat? And your personal life. It's a bit of fun.
It could cost you your job.
It's just a fling, a laugh, a lunch, a leg over. Huh? It's an easy line to cross. Merseybeat. The new series continues Monday at 8:30 on BBC One. Because life isn't always uniform.
With an inmate on death row, there's a rough ride to the truth now on BBC One. Amanda Donahoe's the lawyer, uncovering the secret in Shame 2.